I want to talk about a couple of fun stories, one from Germany, one from London. And my overall point is to say that if you're not actively in favour of very substantial, pervasive, widespread and quite radical programmes of repatriation, then you are objectively, just necessarily in fact, in favour of immigration and of substantially increased levels of immigration. It is as stark as that. Now the first story here is from Berliner Zeitung. It's in German. That's the original. Behad Khani, he's an Iranian immigrant to Germany. He got there in '86, and he's talking about New Year's Eve. Integrate yourself. So here's the Google Translate. New Year's Eve, integrate yourself. It's the whole article seems to be a way of saying, yeah, you integrate yourself. It's another way of saying, I know you are, but what am I? Okay, it's not. You couldn't really say it's an intellectual article. I wouldn't even say it contains any argument. What he's saying is, yes, there were a lot of attacks, a lot of setting off fireworks, a lot of assaults, a lot of criminality on New Year's Eve in Germany. It's your fault, Germans, because we're not going to take any complaints from you. You have no moral authority. You've done bad things in history. Therefore, we can do whatever we like to you, and there's no harm in it. And what we want to do is to take over Germany. Okay, so let me go down a bit. There we are. There's the burnt-out bus from New Year's Eve in Germany. That's far from the worst of it. Okay. You know, strange things happen when you start 2 world wars and lose both. I mean, he is really sticking it in the eye of Germans. This is a testament to Germans' loss of self-confidence and moral authority. The fact that they can be mocked about what they did almost a century ago, and the fact that they lost wars, not just that they took part in wars, but they started the wars, but they lost them. He seems to be saying if you'd won the wars, it would be different. When you fight to the last bullet for the craziest idea in history, again, was it the craziest? It may have been the most evil. I would have thought Mao's economic policies, Mao Zedong's economic policies are the craziest, but anyway. And after that last bullet is fired, sends out 12-year-olds with guns, without ammo, with broomsticks. And if that didn't work either, you surrender, and some then gradually adopt the feel-good narrative that you weren't defeated but liberated. So apparently Germans have been saying that to themselves all these years, whilst others build a wall and claim that the perpetrators are on the other page. Okay, so I mean, he's really insulting Germans. He's basically saying you have no moral authority. There are 3 lines he uses. First of all, you are warmongering genocidists from a century ago, and secondly, you support Israel, and thirdly, you are Islamophobic. That's basically what he's saying. Those are 3 things. So we can do what we like to you. You have no moral authority to accuse us of anything. We don't have to justify ourselves. We can do it because you're bad people. That's basically what the article is saying. So, if you were just a community of thieves and appropriators, and suddenly you no longer want to know anything about your neighbours who have disappeared, or about the crematoria and gas chambers. So he's saying that I think he's saying, that is the level of moral authority that you Germans have. A community of thieves and appropriators. And then you pat yourself on the back. You could have come to terms with the past in a solid way if you attested to a unique culture of remembrance and responsibility. Okay. And then one of the weird things that happens is that these simple people might not quite trust you. He means himself, I think. And yes, who can blame them? That they are not so keen to identify with this society. So they go to Germany, but Germany has an evil history, therefore they can't integrate, they can't identify with it. And then further down, where he goes on about Israel, he talks about the Middle East. The German enthusiasm for and support for the state that Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch describe as a state that practices apartheid in the territories it occupies is also taking on increasingly ideological traits in German editorial offices. Apparently, in proportion to this, the more right-wing and extremist the state becomes, from which numerous people who now live on Sonnenallee, that's a part of Berlin, have fled. So he's saying, you've supported Israel, and then Arabs now come to Germany, and then they make trouble in Germany, and it serves you right. And then he gets to the point, I think we're at the point now where we should look things in the eye. What he means is address the reality and state it plainly. Gladly together, gladly sober, etc., etc. And he say, let's start with the simple statement that we, migrants, foreigners, people with call us what you like, are not going to leave that easily. Well, he says, and neither do you, dear organic Germans. That's organic Germans. That's an insult. The word that's used in the original article is Biodeutsche. Biodeutsche. Yeah, that is not a compliment. Though demographically, you're definitely, you, the Germans, definitely going away. They or you are dying out, and your country needs about 400,000 new workers over the next 15 years. That's about 1 million immigrants a year. We migrants will probably inherit this land. We could play for more time here, for time you don't have. But that's just a side note. So what he's saying is we're taking over, we've pretty much taken over now. All it is a question of time waiting for the handover. And then he goes back to the Holocaust again. Perhaps we should realise that if you start a world war for the idea of racial purity, you might find yourself forced to become an immigrant, an immigration country after its defeat. After all, the victorious powers also shared our mistrust of this society, and maybe we should consider at this point who owes whom what here, who is taking to whom and how. I think that's a play on the Marxist the Marxist shibboleth, who does what to whom. Now there seem to be two justifications. One is here, we ensure that the Aryan nightmare does not become reality. You can see, he's basically, well, I'll go through this bit. What is certain? We are here, yes, you've already said that, not only for your pension funds, but because we ensure that the Aryan nightmare never becomes reality in this country. So Arabs have come to Germany not because of the pension funds, not because of the economic opportunities, but because they thought to themselves, oh, we must go to Germany in order to prevent Germany developing Aryan politics again. For the fact that this reality is so far away that even the Nazis apparently gave it up. So even the Nazis gave it up. Just as we all gave up the idea of this social democratic comprehensive school and middle class coexistence. So he's saying that the idea of middle class coexistence has gone as well. And social democracy, he seems to be saying, has gone away. Without extreme violence eclipsing that of Hitler's Germany, that nightmare will not come true. This tooth is finally pulled. So he seems to be saying, we're here to make sure the Aryan nightmare doesn't come back, even though it will not come true and the tooth has been pulled. So it's already gone. That makes no sense, even on its own terms. And the other point he's making, the other justification, if you can call it that, is that as one of his Israeli friends, he doesn't approve of Israel, one of his Israeli friends apparently said to him, is that the Arabs are the Jews' revenge on Germany. So those appear to be the two justifications. And finally, if you go, he then turns to not historic guilt, not the guilt of the Holocaust, not the guilt of supporting Israel, but now the character of Germans today. What has remained is the base vulgarity of the individual. It's quite an insult there. The phrase he uses in the original is die niedere Gemeinheit, which means the really mean, low, nasty, mean, low nastiness of the base vulgarity of the individual, which always finds its way, always breaks new ground, and thereby exposes the unwillingness of the Germans. I'm not sure what unwillingness that is. It could mean the unwillingness to accept people like him. I don't know. In the fascist, and then he runs through a litany of things he doesn't like about modern Germany. In the fascist chats of the police, in the missing ammunition of the Bundeswehr, in the abysses of the state and its secret services. This is purple prose, which first covers up the NSU deeds and then closes their files. I don't know what the NSU deeds are. Of the 1,000 registered xenophobic attacks just in the year to which medals of the so-called welcoming culture were pinned to one's chest at the same time. In the lack of indignation on your part when your Minister of the Interior has posters put up nationwide on which we are to be urged in our mother tongues to pay to go back to where we came from, in the hundreds of thousands of copies of Tylo Sarazin's books. So someone writes a book and people buy it and read it. This means that Germans are bad people, and therefore they can't complain about the crimes that are committed on their territory by immigrants on New Year's Eve. In the disgustingly blunt gut feeling racism that the majority of his readers share with him, in support of American wars against our countries in your Afghanistan war. So that was Germany's Afghanistan war. And there's this bit then about Islamophobia. I don't need to read that. But what he's saying is that Germans are a bad bunch. Just don't complain. You have no authority to complain about the bad things we do. It's a little bit like if I go and beat up and mug a Muslim individual in the street, or I go and burgle their house and I get caught. I say, well, on the other side of the country, up in Bradford or Rochdale or Oldham, there's a couple of Muslim cousins. They've been involved in a child rape gang. Therefore, I'm entitled to burgle a Muslim or beat up and rob a Muslim down in Aldershot, let's say. This is not, I think he's posing as an intellectual. That's the impression I get from the article, but it's not an intellectual argument. It's not an argument of any kind at all. It's just saying, get stuffed. We can do what we want. We're doing this. You can't complain. We'll keep on doing it. We'll take over, and we don't need to integrate. And if we want to commit crimes on New Year's Eve, don't complain. We're not going to listen to your complaints. Now, that argument will suit any kind of wrongdoing. It will be a mistake for German people to think that it will only be used to excuse and justify bad deeds once a year on New Year's Eve. That can justify theft, rape, murder, any crime can be got off the hook using that argument. Okay, so the next one I want to look at is from London. That is in Shadwell. Now this is in My London. It's by Miriam Khan. The bustling East London neighbourhood that feels like you're living in Bangladesh. This is from yesterday, and well, let's look at this article. The best thing about living in Shadwell is that you are living with people like you, says a local who has lived and traded in the area for more than 20 years. The heartland of the Bangladeshi community in London falls within the borough of Tower Hamlets, there's a surprise, where over 40% of people are Bangladeshi. In Shadwell North, that figure rises to 54.7%. Now, what this lady seems to be doing, she doesn't actually say I celebrate this, but her article appears to celebrate this. It seems to be a milder version of saying we are the majority here. It's not as nasty as unpleasant as the Berlin article, but well, make up your own minds about it. She talks about how the presence of the Bangladeshi community goes back to the 1920s. There may have been one or two then. Though the area has changed and developed massively over the past 100 years, the Bangladeshi population is still concentrated around Shadwell today. Now, first you have this fella, that market trader, that's Iman Sarwar, 45, lives in the Shadwell area and has seen the area grow and change over the years. Iman told My London it was a good area to live in before, and it is now, but things have changed. Before there were less people and it wasn't as crowded. The area used to be quieter and cleaner, but these things have changed too. Yeah, if you import Bangladesh into the UK, that part of England that has become Bangladesh, that will adopt Bangladeshi standards of hygiene. The businesses in the area are for those who live locally. There is absolutely no concession to indigenous Brits here. This area is Bangladesh writ small. For instance, it talks about the stores that are for Bangladeshi people. The McDonald's on Commercial Road looks out of place amidst a community that has made the area a reflection of themselves. Iman said, everyone wants to come here because there are Bangladeshi people here. Those coming to the UK don't want to go to Manchester or Barking. They want to come here because of the community has been built here. So basically, people from Bangladesh want to go to Shadwell because it's like Bangladesh. That's the logic of it. The best thing about living in this area is the belonging and community. You are living with people like you. And then there's another lady, this next lady, Afruza Begum. She's lived in the area for 13 years, and she says it has changed substantially with more businesses coming to the area. And she has said more and more Bangladeshi people coming into the area is something that makes her happy. She's saying it's a strong sense of community. Now then what you have is the local imam from the Ashadibi Centre said the congregation is largely Bangladeshi with some Somali and Arab Muslims. And he goes on to say, people in this area are treated, typical what you'd expect an imam to say about the treatment they get. People in this area are treated like second-class citizens. They are living in crowded houses, and there is a lack of opportunity and role models in the area. I think the lack of opportunity will see young people leave the area over the years. Yeah, to form new mini Bangladeshis in other parts of the UK and other parts of London. Now then, the market trader Mustafa Hussain, he's worked in the area for 13 years. He says there are more Asian things in the area over the year. This has changed how and what we trade. We get fresh produce from Bangladesh. About 90% of our customer base are from Bangladesh, but mostly the older community. And he then goes on to say, it's easier living with your own people. That's the best thing about the area. So you're not having to live with those English people. You're living with other Bangladeshis. Again, it's not very clean in the area. That's probably the worst thing. Yeah, that's what happens when you import Bangladesh into the UK. It becomes like Bangladesh. And then if we go down a little bit, if I go down there, then Salim Uddin, he works in the area in a local sweet shop. We cater specifically to the Bangladeshi community in the area. Again, no concessions to the indigenous population. It's great to live somewhere where you can live within your community. It's crowded, but it's a great way to bond with other Bangladeshi people. Yeah, Bangladesh is the place to do that. The best part about living here is you feel like you are living in Bangladesh. Blunt, open and honest as can be. This is not, it doesn't contain the ill will and the blame that Bangladeshi article contained. I think that's probably a historic legacy that we, the English, have from our historic moral authority, that we won't take being insulted and stabbed in the eye and poked in the eye quite so much. But it is in the same vein. What you are seeing is it's not immigration, it's settlement, it is takeover, and that is Shadwell has been taken over, and most other parts of Tower Hamlets. Now, my point is you can't deal with that simply. It's gone too far simply to say, hold on, I now oppose immigration, or I'd like to reduce immigration. The only way to deal with problems like that, where you have parts of England that are no longer part of England, they are part of Bangladesh or part of Pakistan or part of Somalia. The only way to deal with that is through very widespread and pervasive repatriation, and no one anywhere is thinking about that, and certainly not thinking about it seriously, and got up plans for paid repatriation. Those are not serious plans either. That is rubbish. That is just window dressing, a method of avoiding engaging with the issue. No one anywhere is thinking through an effective method of repatriation. And the people who are simply talking about reducing immigration, they are even worse. Effectively, if that is what you're talking about, let's reduce or stop immigration, you are in fact calling for more immigration, for higher levels of immigration. What you are saying is that if you're calling for that, you know it's not going to happen now, you know it's not going to happen in a year's time, it might happen in 5, 10 or 30 years' time. And what you are saying, if you are calling for governments to address the issue purely of immigration, you are saying is that when that happens, at that point, then we will have achieved the perfect optimum level of immigration. Otherwise, you will then have to say, right, once it's stopped, we will then have to call for repatriation. If you're not calling for repatriation, you are saying that magically, by some miraculous coincidence, when immigration stops, that will be the perfect level of immigration, and that we are not there yet because immigration has not stopped yet. So in fact, objectively, if you're simply talking about stopping or reducing immigration, like say the huge majority of commentators, I mean I can rattle off a lot of names here, Nigel Farage, Douglas Murray, Simon Webb from History Debunked, Daniel Hannan, the whole cast of GB News, Katie Hopkins, Sargon of Akkad, none of these people have called for repatriation in any way that I've ever heard. And effectively they go along with what George Orwell said of pacifism in the 1930s and 40s being objectively pro-fascist. Being anti-immigration today is effectively being to be pro higher levels of immigration. Now, this is not, I don't think this is people realise this. It's not that they're not intellectually sharp enough to get it. It's a failure of intellectual courage. The way I think it works is people think, how do we repatriate millions of people without eye-watering violence? I can't think of a way. I don't want to think about something as unattractive as that, so I won't think about it. I only want to think about nice, sweet, appetizing things like saying we need to reduce the level of immigration. And they're not even going that far. They're not talking about the 1.1 million visas that were issued last year. They're talking about the rubber dinghy invasion. That's what they focus on. So they're not even saying we want to stop legal immigration. So they're simply saying we're against things that are ugly and unappealing. And that means if people don't think about the issue, which they then don't, that means that there is no possibility of coming up with a reasonably humane, consensual method of widespread repatriation. And that means it becomes all the more unthinkable because no one is thinking or talking about a humane method of doing it. And that is the problem we have today. No one is thinking through an orderly means of widespread repatriation. And that means when it comes, it is likely to be very violent. It is essential for people to think it through, and that is what is not happening. And I hope those two articles press home the reason why it is essential. Thank you.